I'm not, so.
First order of business are the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting held Monday, March 8th, 2010. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Second. All in favor, opposed, carried.
Item 2 is a delegation from Ms. Helen Brown regarding the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy related to small parks and various other green spaces. Just ask Ms. Brown to come up to the podium.
Forward, please.
Good afternoon, committee and chairwoman. I've even got my little clock here to make sure I don't go over time.
Oh, and here I was prepared to let you have hours.
Well, you can, of course. I want to address the conundrum that we're all in regarding the Metro, the draft plan for Metro. And in particular, that part of it that concerns the small parks, the green spaces. I might touch on the golf course problem. But, and I just want to offer some of I've been very observant of all that's been going on. And I want to just comment based on what I've observed over the last few weeks. I guess it's now, it's 2 months. Because it was January the 18th when I first became aware of the city's response to Metro. And the words that jumped out at me at that time, when I was just scanning through the recommendations that came from staff and then were accepted by council, were the words regionally insignificant and parks less than 25 acres, general urban. Now, I didn't know at that time what general urban meant, but I quickly then flipped through and found the description of general urban versus conservation rec. And the little bells, you might call them red flags, started going off in my head. Why would the city want to put our parks of less than 25 acres into a category that's clearly not as protected by as they would be if they were in conservation rec? Now, this was all my initial thoughts to it. I want to emphasize that none of my red flags were put in my head by any aspiring politicians for the next elections in the city. Nobody was fear-mongering to me. It was my own head that was questioning, why would our city be doing this? And after that meeting, in the very short question period that we are allowed, I tried to ask the question, what is going on here? Of course, unfortunately, I had a mint in my mouth, and I'm sure nobody understood what I was talking about. But anyway, that was when I first expressed my concerns. And I'm here today to express them, hopefully a little more lucidly. And I want to offer what might be considered, hopefully by your committee, as a solution to part of the problem. I also want to say that one of the reasons that many members of or many of the residents of the city have been really stirred up is because we have been getting inaccurate and incomplete answers to our questions. And so, depending on who we ask, what is this all about? You get different answers. And some of the answers are obvious. To anybody with half a brain, they're obviously designed to sort of placate you and just kind of, oh, don't worry about that. We're looking after it. That kind of down-putting sort of a reaction from people who we have a right to ask these questions of. And I think that I and many other people have also then had our concerns raised when we recognize what was going on, that, hey, are we being purposely duped, or do people just not know the answers to our questions? So there has been a fair amount of fear-mongering by council. And I might like to point out here that we've been told about the growing powers of the horrible Metro. The Metro will be wanting more money, that Coquitlam only has 6 votes out of 125 votes, and that for the past 10 years or so, we have not been allowed to be in the Parks Committee at Metro. And although these things are all probably true in a way, they have been said to us as if this is a big bad thing to be really worried about. Well, a lot of us are worried about this government, this level of government. And, and some of us think that this council has inordinate powers when it comes to land use designations and other things that seriously affect our lives and our investments in our property. And on and on and on it goes. So I would like to, and my first suggestion is that I think that if the city really was serious about wanting to allay the people's concerns about the small parks being in that or being recommended to be in that general urban category, that this city could, with the powers that it presently has, could dedicate every park in this city, and they could make it a policy that every park that's created in the future would have a dedication status to it. And that would at least allow the city then, and it would allow all the citizens to know that if the city, for whatever reason, maybe someday, 15 years or 10 years from now, there might be what seems to be a legitimate reason to redesignate a park for some other purpose, then let it, be discussed and everything, and let it go to council requiring a 2/3 vote of council to change that that park land use designation, and followed by a public referendum and public hearings. And so that people are not as fearful as we presently are, because you and I know, and a lot of people in this room know, that our parks right now, except for the 3 that are dedicated, are, in my phrases, are sitting ducks for development if some council at some point decides that they want to do that. They are one public hearing and one vote on council away from having their land use changed. And I don't think that's good enough. I think that, and I don't believe that the majority of council wants to take advantage of that. But as I'm suggesting, if you want to make a really clear message to the public that you too value those parks and their future, then dedicate all of them. And make it, as I say, a policy that all parks that are created in the future will be dedicated. And I know that, that the parks that we do have that have come into existence because of the DCC charges that we now have, and I think we've had maybe for 20 years, and I don't know which parks were created under the DCC charges and which ones preceded that, but, and I know that you can't sell those parks without having that money go directly into the Parkland Acquisition Fund. But what's the good of that money sitting in the Parkland Acquisition Fund if there aren't suitable lands to buy as a park, or that you can afford to buy as a park? So, although there are some things in there that maybe make sense on paper, in practicality, I don't think they do. So that is my main recommendation, that the city would do that. My other recommendation is that for those areas that are environmentally sensitive, I think, and have been listed in the city's response as being regionally insignificant, I think that all green spaces are regionally significant. I think that any of the parks in Surrey are significant to my livability. I don't think that, we can live in such isolated circumstances that we can consider that it's just our green spaces that are environmentally significant to us. It's a much bigger thing than that. So I think that that those riparian areas and other green spaces should have the status of conservation. And I agree with Linda Reamer when she, at the last meeting, suggested, well, maybe there should be more categories, more, a bigger variety of designations that people like yourselves can slot different properties into. Excuse me. And I think that the golf courses should be also considered conservation, recreation, obviously. But it's a slightly different issue than the parks. I have no solution no recommendation other than just that I think that they are conservation rec. But in terms of what the city can presently do, you could probably do it at the next council meeting. You can dedicate, by the virtue of having 2/3 of this council vote in favor of it, you could dedicate every park in the city that is not currently dedicated. And I personally would like to see that happen.
Okay, you're almost 10 minutes now.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Oh, you didn't get big hook. Okay, one last thing. I think that it would be really helpful in the future, hopefully starting very soon, that our city would be more inclusive of its residents and more interactive. I think that there is a real gap between you and us, and I think that can be resolved. I think that there are different things that can be done so that people feel like they are more part of what's going on in the city and at City Hall. And I would like to see more education for the general public regarding how City Hall works and how local government works, and also that that the advisory committees that have citizens on them be reinstated. And I think finally that there is a real need in this province for us to have an appeal process. Every other province in Canada has an appeal process where decisions of local government can be appealed. And we don't have that in British Columbia, and I think we should.
Okay.
So that's it. Thanks for the extra time.
Thank you. And I will mention to you, when I tried to explain to the public last council meeting, it was I that suggested the green zone should be split, and I believe it should be into the riparian areas, which is conservation, and I believe it should be then recreation. I believe golf courses should be, they can't be in that kind of a zone because they're in so many zones across the region. But there must be some way for Metro to designate them some special status. And I believe staff are working on this. So just before you go any further, all of this is going to be discussed at the end by staff. The park dedication has been put into staff's hands, and you're going to be hearing from them when the item comes up at the end of the meeting. Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Helen. Appreciate it. Next item, please.
Item 3 is a delegation from Tony Ramalho regarding Housing Choices program.
Okay, come forward, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I have a brief reading that I trust will allow me to bring forth all of the items that Councillor Reid and I think, talked about recently during a very brief...
Did you bring a picture of your...
I'm sorry?
Did you bring a picture?
There are pictures that provided to staff, and I do have some other pictures which I can pass over.
If you can just put them up on, if one staff member can help you put them up, please.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to share with you a proposal which I think will meet some of the housing concerns in the city, and I think it is also socially responsible and I believe a win-win situation for everyone involved. So what is it that I am proposing? And this regards a 2-story duplex property which you can see on the picture on the upper left side. And the proposal is for the rezoning of that property, which would permit conversion to a legal 4-plex that would then meet all of the appropriate health and safety requirements. The property is located within the area that's newly supported by the city for higher density and housing choices. So why the presentation at this time? Based on the city's initiative to increase the density and provide affordable and effective housing choices, rezoning is necessary before conversion to a fourplex. So as the initiative and the processes are completely new and without historical data, before I proceed with an application to rezone, I would appreciate knowing how the committee feels about the proposal and the likelihood of it being approved by the committee and eventually City Council. Now, I understand that the decision may not be forthcoming today and that the entire council also needs to provide approval. Rezoning is very much a personal, financial, and emotional burden for ourselves, as well as consuming city staff resources. So therefore, having an indication of support in this very new initiative is an important component for a decision to proceed whether to go forward with the rezoning or not. I've had preliminary discussions with staff in development as well as in building, and indications are that this is very much feasible and with very much support the city's strategies for affordable housing. If you'd please permit me to highlight some of the social and community issues that are addressed by my proposal. I believe that it provides a density that is supported and desired in the city's Housing Choices Initiative. I think the neighborhood harmonization and increased density would certainly be very much in line. There are a lot of other units similar to this in the area. I think it meets all the requirements that are identified in the preliminary city documents. For example, I do provide, there's 100% off-street parking, as can be seen on both the picture on the bottom as well as on the right-hand side. Doesn't come so clear on the right, but there's 100% off-street parking. It encourages lane access and utilization, which is part of the strategies, and there's extensive open green spaces. There would be no impact on the neighbors or the street. There'd be no change to the existing operation. It encourages use of laneways by redirecting traffic away from the immediate street, the residential street, and sort of redirecting into the, I'm not sure what they would be called, but certainly the collector streets, I think is the right terminology. Provides better safety and security of the residents, both inside and outside, through meeting health and safety rules. Provides immediate lower cost and socially responsible alternate housing, and certainly provides efficient use of land. It's near public transit and the proposed mass transit station for SkyTrain if and when it does come around. And it certainly provides secure, safe, and affordable housing to, I'll say, single mothers and young families. So what do I need? I need the committee's recommendation or the support level for the proposal and the likelihood of this proposal being accepted or adopted by council. In this way, I can then make an educated and well-informed decision that will benefit everyone.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your phone call. When Mr. Ramalho called me, he said that he had spoken to staff and he sort of wanted to get some feedback from us. I suggested he come forward. There's no way that this committee would give you a recommendation today because we don't do anything without a full staff report to start with. From my own personal view, when we redid our neighborhood plans and are in the process still of doing all these things, the fourplexes and that we envision are perhaps different than what you're showing us. The fourplexes that we've been looking at are in the form of coach houses and gatehouses and allowing maybe four dwelling units on a large lot, but not in this configuration. I do not believe at this point in time it would even be financially feasible to go through all the safety and health concerns that you would have to do to bring this up to even the standard that you could even go for rezoning. The costs are incredibly prohibitive. So for me right now, it isn't something that I could support in this stage. The lot to rebuild and come up with a new form of housing, and our staff I know has a whole booklet on different forms of housing that you can come up with. I'd be glad to look at it. But when I'm looking at this city 40, 50 years out, I need to have buildings come more into, if they're going to be extensively redone, they should perhaps come more into conformity with what's being done at this time. So that's how I feel. And I would recommend that we send this back to staff for comment, and you can certainly deal with them. Councillor Reamer, did you want to speak? And
sure. And my comments are along the same lines as Councillor Reid's. It probably would be very expensive for you to do the necessary safety and fire updates that you would have to do to bring it in compliance with the BC Building Code. And although I'm certainly happy to have staff take a look at that, but that's just my off-the-cuff opinion at this particular time. And in order to do this, we would need those updates done. So, thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'm quite impressed with your, the way you put this together in terms of identifying efficient uses of the land and affordable housing. But again, I just need to defer to staff. Usually it's staff making recommendations to us rather than us making recommendations to others. So I don't feel comfortable, and I certainly can't say, oh, that's great. I need to talk with our folks who are trained and have the education and consult with them. So I'm certainly interested in hearing more about it. I'm not one to say absolutely no, but I also can't give you a definitive answer absolutely yes. So if there's more opportunity for dialogue to find out exactly more about what needs to be done, I'm certainly willing to listen.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate your comments very much, and that was the real reason why I wanted to, or Councillor Reid and I had a brief discussion and wanted to I guess have a bit of an opportunity to discuss this. From my perspective, I think that there is an opportunity, irrespective of the costs associated with the conversion, if that's the term that we're going to use. So if we put that aside, and the city has a need for housing that, or I guess, for housing that's more economical, that is safe, that meets the requirements of a lot of the folks in the city, then this is one way to go. And so, what I'm saying is, in this case, we could certainly make a really good case for that to happen. But rezoning is necessary, and that's why I wanted to get your feedback as to whether or not this is something that I want to expend some resources, some financial resources in trying to do the rezoning route, as well as obviously there would be a fair amount of staff resources that would be required for that. And then in the end, if there's no appetite for the conversion, then why go through it?
Yeah.
So
and
I appreciate your
from my point of view, with the existing dwelling, there isn't. But go to staff and get your numbers all done, and then make your decision. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I very much appreciate you coming
All right,
forward.
thanks for your time.
You're very welcome. Next item, please.
Item 4 is Report of General Manager Planning and Development related to the Community Greenhouse Gas Reduction Strategy, Recommended Preferred Path and Official Community Plan Amendment Framework. We have introductory comments by our Manager of Community Planning, Rob Innes, and a presentation by Alex Boston, HB Lanark, a consultant.
Thank you. And pictures?
And pictures. Madam Chair and committee, the report in front of you responds to a provincial requirement for all municipalities in BC to include in their OCPs by May 31st targets, policies, and actions regarding greenhouse gas emission strategies. Since November, staff have been working with an interdepartmental work group as well as with consultants, Alex Boston and HB Lanark, on that work. We were in front of you in February in a workshop format, getting your input on some of the initial findings. Based on that work and further review and 2 public open houses in early February, staff are presenting the preferred path for committee consideration. I'd like to introduce Alex Boston, the consultant with the HB Lanark, who's going to provide a brief presentation. Alex.
Chair Reid, Council, it's a pleasure to be in front of you again. I know you have a tight agenda today, so I'm going to be as quick as possible, and if you have any questions of clarification as we move through this, by all means, we'll entertain them. The agenda essentially is going to be me providing a little bit of context initially. We'll look at this OCP amendment framework that is being shaped by a number of policies and measures that Council and this committee had an opportunity to review. The public has, and so has quite intensively staff. And I would say that it's quite a dedicated staff team that is working closely with us at HB Lanark. And if I'm not able to entertain any of the questions, they will be able to. If you have any recommendations about how we can strengthen this OCP amendment framework, we're very, very receptive to that. Essentially, from a contextual perspective, what this is all about is trying to maintain the stability in our atmosphere that we've had well over the last 10,000 years. And it involves actions both by senior levels of government right down to local levels of government. What's driving the work right now at this municipality and municipalities right across the province is this third major bullet here, the Green Communities Act, which is every municipality has to have targets, policies, and actions inside their OCPs by May 31st. This is consistent with the commitment voluntarily made by the municipality to establish complete, compact, and energy-efficient communities under the Climate Action Charter. That second bullet. This is, of course, being driven by the provincial government's commitment to achieve 33% emission reductions by 2020 and 80% by 2050. And those emission reduction targets are essentially in line with what we have to do to achieve atmospheric stability. A brief discussion about targets once again, and this is a review for many of you. Most municipalities and the province went through a top-down process, kind of stuck their finger in the air. What do we have to do? Where are we going to go? And it's been a symbolic effort to demonstrate a political commitment. What the city of Coquitlam is doing, because of the conscientiousness of your staff, is doing a bottom-up process to model policies and actions that could realistically be advanced in this jurisdiction to make emission reductions that are within the capability of the municipality. Right now, the BC government is going through this bottom-up process, like the city of Coquitlam is. I would say that it's very unlikely this will be the last time you do it. You'll be doing an OCP amendment. There's a GHG reduction strategy as part of this process. You'll have a transportation plan that's being updated over the next year and a half, 2 years. That's going to develop some more rigorous targets as well as more rigorous policies and actions. You'll update your OCP. And then at some point in time, you're probably going to be doing more detailed policy and planning. Who knows? It could be a green building strategy. It could be a district energy strategy for the municipality. To look at currently where emissions are generated in the community, overwhelmingly it's in the transportation sector, and that's also where we see the most growth. If there was no intervention by the province or by the municipality, your emissions would probably grow in the order of 93% by 2050. You're already beginning to take some action, so they're not going to be growing to that extent. This project is essentially going to help the city of Coquitlam to deliver two things, this OCP amendment and a GHG reduction strategy, which will provide much more substantive analysis about what the options are available to the city. We've gone through 2 phases of the process where we were basically providing a baseline analysis of where the city is at, exploring options with council staff and the public, and then modeling those out. Right now, we're right here, recommending a path based on this input. Subsequent to this, there'll be further open houses and then the development of a more detailed GHG reduction strategy. What's driven most of the work has been 2 major drivers: policies and actions by the city and a continuation of those trends. And based on input, we've added additional realistic efforts. And then it's not possible for the city on its own to go about deep emission reduction measures on its own. We've also modeled the impact of senior level of government efforts. And I would say a really important principle from the outset shared by us and your staff is let's not make this another silo of activity. How can we integrate this work into all of the other activity that the city is already engaging in? So a lot of the principles and priorities of the city that's reflected in your OCP and other major documents like your Sustainable Transportation Plan and your waste management strategies, they're also reflected in the vision and the overall plan. When I last was in front of you about a month and a half ago, I shared with you the results of where the municipality was already going. And we saw that emissions would likely grow by 2020, but then they'd be reduced in the order of 29% based on some efforts that the city is doing that are already consistent with with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so the blue bar is community-wide emission reductions. The red line there is per capita emission reductions. The green line underneath is where the province is going. And this is looking sectorally at what the emission reductions would be out to 2021 and then beyond to 2051. And this does consider the population, the residential and commercial growth rates that are forecast for the municipality. So based on your feedback and others, I would say that there was a desire generally by council and the public to go deeper, but let's be realistic. And if I could quote a statement made during the council workshop about a month and a half ago, I think it was something to the effect, it's like training for a marathon. We want a goal that will push us to perform at our best, but not an impossible target that won't be achieved and will discourage us. So this is what we did, and we added in other layers of policies and actions that are consistent with where council wanted to go, with some additional ones by the public. And I think most fundamentally, it is about neighborhood revitalization. So this brings us to the OCP amendment framework. And this is based on the preferred path. So we will flesh out in greater detail the policy options that are available, because there isn't only one way to achieve these emission reductions. So we remodeled where the city could go, and you'll see that essentially we've been able to not see a bump in growth, but we've seen some emission reductions by 2021, 3.1%. And then out to 2051, 37% emission reductions. And the per capita reductions are in the order of 34% by 2021 and almost 70% by the middle of the century. And in conversations with your staff, what they're recommending is that these two circled targets here would be the targets in your amendment to the OCP. This is a policy wedge graph showing the various share of emission reductions across the municipality. And what we've done is we've delineated that top wedge that you see bracketed in black are senior government policies and measures. And the large gray one, astonishingly, is GHG reductions that would happen as a result of California tailpipe standards. The other large share of emission reductions would happen as a result of the BC Building Code. That's the dark olive green wedge there. The light blue wedge is a result of senior government transit investment in the community. The lower wedges are a result of the activity that the municipality is engaging in. And this takes a look at, with population growth, the emission reductions that would happen in the community. I just wanted to comment a little bit because in contact with other municipalities, they're going, well, how come those emission reduction wedges by senior levels of government are so large in comparison to what we're doing municipally? And I think it's in the order of 30%. Is it 30%? Yeah, I believe it's actually 43% of the share of emission reductions would be from municipal activity at 2020 and 30% by 2050. But I just wanted to indicate that municipalities have a certain sphere of influence over all sorts of different activity. The further you go out here, the less influence you have, but you still have some influence over, even passenger vehicles by, providing premium parking spaces to low-emission vehicles. But you have a lot of input over things like land use, which is down there closer to the darker sphere of influence. Other levels of government, the province and the feds in this slide, have much more influence over things like electricity and passenger vehicles. And so this is a real shared effort. There's no way we can make these deep emission reductions without a collaborative effort by every level of government. So what I wanted to do right now is go through, and this is consistent with in the attachment that was given to given to the committee last week, attachment number 6. This is the OCP amendment framework that's recommended, and these numbers ABC correspond with the ABC numbers that are in that recommended framework. So once again, the intention was to be able to provide a path that showed a 34% per capita emission reduction by 2020 and minus 20% by 2030. And the legislative obligation as per Bill 27 is that we need policies and actions. And this is what's recommended as the primary actions, and community-wide policies and actions complete this strategy, complete the strategic transportation plan by the end of next year, and also complete the corporate climate action plan. And there was a lot. Land use is the area of influence that local governments have the greatest degree to have an impact on. And this is this pedestrian walk shed that we developed for the city of Coquitlam, and it actually would require updating because there would be greater walkability in the northeast as a result of new information that we have from staff. But this will influence some of what the municipality is able to do to strengthen walkability in the community. The starred items in this attachment number 6 are the ones that we have added on top of our last meeting that we had. And ultimately, they are consistent with the direction that the municipality is going in, but they add a greater degree of specificity. How the municipality goes about achieving some of these, there's a lot of latitude for that. In the transportation sector, and I should add that in the OCP amendment framework, the emphasis has been placed on the measures that would be taken by the municipality and not what would be required by the provincial government. In the transportation sector, certainly there would be investment required by the province and TransLink for such measures as the Evergreen line, as well as other transit improvements. And in the transportation sector, it's also important to reinforce that these will be fleshed out in much greater detail by the strategic transportation plan that's currently in development. In the building sector, I think the only graph I wanted to draw attention to is most of the emission reductions would happen as a result of what the province is doing with the BC Building Code. There's some important but marginal gains that the municipality can make by some small measures around promoting efficiency improvements and also promoting district energy. And we can go into those in greater detail if you're interested. But outreach and education and market-sensitive land use tools would be ways in which the municipality is able to make additional headway. We have incorporated into the modeled evaluation of emission reductions district energy in the northeast and in waterfront. And on top of that, as a result of your input, a small amount of additional district energy in other fast-growing neighborhood. In the solid waste sector, it's doing some additional measures, small but important, on top of Metro's efforts. And then also encouraging senior governments, the province and the federal government, to strengthen their work in the whole sphere of reduction. Everybody talks about reduction being the first order of importance in the waste management hierarchy, but very few efforts are really genuinely being made to reduce waste. So that really concludes the briefing on the policies and actions in the recommended framework. And if you would like me to clarify anything, or staff, I can attempt to do so, or if you see opportunities where it could be strengthened, that would be great.
I have one question, and then I'll let my counterparts do it. Why isn't the government doing this tailpipe?
Sorry, why isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, the government, the provincial government, and this is, one area where the provincial government can be commended, is traditionally it's not the domain of provincial governments to legislate automobile efficiency standards. The highest automobile efficiency standards that are being advanced in North America right now are being done by the jurisdiction of California, and the province of BC said that's where we have to go, and they have basically superseded the federal government and says we will adopt those. Now, as a result of changes in the United States, the United States will adopt California standards, and it's almost certain that we will have them federally. But kudos to the BC government for saying we're going to go there regardless of whether the federal government is going to. So that is we modeled that, and that will happen.
It just seems...
Sorry, I might have miscommunicated.
It just seems it's taken a long time. I moved there in mid-90s, and the standards were there then, and it's taken us all this time for us to recognize it. So, Councillor Reamer, then Councillor Robinson. Councillor Robinson and Councillor Reamer.
Okay, it's a 3 R's up here. I just have a question about the wedges. Just a clarification. There's a grow smarter wedge, which is your light green.
Lights. Oh, yes, I do.
I don't know if I can navigate this here with my big thumbs.
Do you want to go back?
If we go back to that, yeah, there's a grow. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Growing smarter, and I just want to know if you can just take a minute. That's about land use, I'm assuming, but I wanted to double check.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's a little, just right 2 slides before that. 2 slides before that. Yeah. So growing smarter. This is a bit of a challenge. What we have done is that we have attributed a certain portion of emission reductions that take place in the transportation to the land use change. And it's really difficult to actually tease out whether it's transit or walking or biking that actually is responsible for the change. So we've attempted to tease those out in that wedge, but we haven't done it perfectly, and we never will, and nobody will, because it's very difficult to do.
I just want to clarify, it's an amalgamation of all those things that will come about as we make some land use decisions. It will come from various sources. That's
right. It's about integrated land use and transportation.
That was one question. I had one other question. It's actually for our staff, that one of the things that caught my attention was partners. And are we in contact with School District 43 and paying attention to what they're doing, and do we stay connected with them around this issue? Because I know that they're looking at the same thing, and do we dialogue with them about it?
Through the Chair, good question. Through this process, we haven't directly involved School District 43. The city is at a higher level, engaging School District 43 on a number of broader strategic issues, but not within the scope of this particular.
Well, I'm just wondering if there might be some room for conversation about what they're doing, what we're doing, where we can dovetail, where we're different.
What we could do, good question again, and I think I'm going to refer to Ryan in terms of Ryan Perry, who's the planner leading this. The school district was informed of the consultation process, and we can make a concerted effort going into the next round of public open houses to make sure they're aware of our processes and get some feedback.
I would love to hear from them, so that would be great. Thank you.
Brian, do you have a comment?
Yeah, certainly, through the chair. The next round, once we have the strategy established, this is one policy that does set some of the direction to open those channels of dialogue and start to explore the programs that are out there and those partnerships that the cost benefit would be high in that it's a partnership rather than strictly a city-driven initiative. So I envision that as sort of one of the next steps when we get to the more detailed implementation, but the policy opens the door to start exploring those. It may not be the only one with school districts.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you. I'm referring to the draft vision of the community greenhouse gas reduction strategy. And the first sentence says, the city is committed to contributing to provincial and global efforts to protect the climate. I'm wondering if that ought not to read provincial, federal, and global efforts to protect the climate.
I think that would be a very strong recommendation.
And the other issue, and perhaps staff can clarify it for me, you've made reference to the Waterfront Village Centre, and we know what that is. It's the Fraser Mills Waterfront Village Centre. Just wondering what the correct name for that development is.
I don't think they have one yet.
The village at Fraser Mills is one of the terms. We haven't actually landed on a final marketing term for it, but we refer to it as that, so we don't lose sight of that opportunity in that location.
Right. I was just wondering if the Fraser Mills name should be in this document.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. That's everything for me. You did a fabulous job of compiling a huge amount of information, and so kudos to you. Thank you.
And that would also be kudos to staff who've played a great role.
Okay, Councillor Asmundson and then Councillor McDonnell. Oh, we're all turned off. One of these days I'm going to send this sound system somewhere very unpleasant.
I'm going to clear it all.
Is it off or on?
It's showing on.
Can you hear?
Yeah, it's just your lights on.
Okay, thank you
Can
very
you
much.
hear us out there?
Thank you for your presentation, your proposal. The comment I have, and I guess is more for staff, because you put in your report here, is we need to consider, as we move forward, the more specific cost-benefit analysis of this specific resource requirements and departmental responsibility. We need to know those for council and everything moving forward. You don't want a plan to fall off the rails because you didn't know what the cost implications were. And if we want to do this, we have to have all the proper information moving forward on these plans, because there's going to be extra costs for monitoring for the city in this, I would assume, and the other actions involved in this. So I agree, and I like your next three steps. I know the strategic transportation plan, the OCP, good steps, but we need to know, and I don't know if that's a staff-driven exercise for the cost-benefit analysis, Ryan, or if that is through the consultant, but we need to know how this is going to roll out, what the costs are, what are the cost benefits, to make sure that we can then, as budgets move forward, look to make sure that we're able to keep our commitment funding-wise. You would not want to see things, costs come up in the councils, but geez, we just can't afford that, and it drops off. So that's one issue I want to make sure that we get done. Mr. Matt?
Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And that's right. I know in previous discussions around this project, there had been, we talked about the cost benefit of taking some of these measures. So we wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost sight of, and it's there for, I guess, more staff's future reference as we move into the the details of the strategy, and I think that would be one of the tests that we apply as various initiatives came forward. What is the cost benefit? What are the costs going in? What are the ultimate benefits? Cost savings, but other environmental benefits. So we don't want to lose sight of that analysis.
And the other part of that is the great reliance we have and the need for the federal and provincial to come through, and especially that I hope they don't start using something that says more downloading costs onto municipalities, because that would then make it very difficult to really succeed in this, and we have to succeed in this. The one other comment I have, which is, we talked about local jobs. We want to have people working, living locally. I do. But it's very, very difficult to achieve that goal when people get a job. Doesn't necessarily they can get a job here. And we've noticed in our transportation network's gone from maybe a single direction to Vancouver to a spider network. We've got traffic going all over the way. So it's a goal, but we've got to do more work on how we actually can start to achieve better results in that area. Thank you.
Yes. Should I comment on that? Because I think it's a very astute observation, and it's important to have a regional perspective about this, and you're drawing that. And I think in this plan, when we've looked at where commercial and residential growth happens, overwhelmingly it is concentrated in the downtown core, and that's where we want the big retail and the large employers, and a certain amount in the neighborhood centers to increase the walkability there. 10% of trips happen within a couple kilometers of home. Mm-hmm. Whatever we can do to shave off a few trips will make a huge contribution to making emission reductions just in people's day-to-day activities.
Yeah.
And I'll make a minor comment just around costs. The way that this plan is designed, most of the costs are marginal costs over and above the other efforts that are taking place by the city already. So it's structured in such a way that it isn't going to be a huge burden, but it will add a certain amount on top. And your point, and it may be appropriate to strengthen that strain of thought in the OCP amendment framework, just emphasizing the important role that the provincial government can play. As part of this exercise, we will quantify the carbon and energy cost savings as a result of proceeding with these policies and actions.
Okay, Councillor McDonnell. You were on.
I think.
Oh, your name was there, or I'm seeing things. Okay. Pardon? Oh, that's why. You trade seats to trick me. Listen, today anything could work. The recommendation is to receive the report. All in favor, opposed, carried. It goes back to staff and back to council. Thank you. And I was missing the last pages in my binder. Next item, please.
Item 5 is report of General Manager Planning and Development related to the permanent shelter and transitional housing next steps. The staff recommendation is that Council authorize staff to A, finalize preparation of a request for proposals document in readiness for distribution to nonprofit organizations in order to engage an operator to secure funding, design, construct, and operate the permanent shelter and transitional housing at 3030 Gordon Avenue. This document is to be finalized in close collaboration with the Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group and BC Housing and be distributed at the time of funding commitment to the project. B, continue to work closely with the Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group and BC Housing in developing a process for evaluation of submitted proposals and discussion with proponents on community expectations for design and operation of the facility. And C, make application to the Regional Steering Committee on Homelessness for 2010 unexpended federal government homelessness funding, should it become available in the coming months and the city be eligible to apply. The second part of the recommendation is that Council directs staff to report back on an approach to proceed with municipal approval processes required to develop the site at 3030 Gordon Avenue. And 3, that Council continue to urge the provincial government to sign the Memorandum of Understanding for the permanent shelter and transitional housing at 3030 Gordon Avenue, negotiated with the province and signed by the city in March 2009, and commit capital and operating funding for the permanent shelter and transitional housing at 3030 Gordon Avenue.
So moved. Second.
Okay, questions. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few remarks, if I could, and as well, Verna Semituk, our acting social planner, was just going to give a brief overview of the report, if the committee wishes.
Okay.
Just first to put it in context, the committee may recall staff were requested to arrange for a visit and tour out to a new housing shelter facility out in Langley, which we did back in early February. And I think it was quite an informative and eye-opening experience. We came back from that with some ideas. I think both the council members that attended as well as staff, I think we kind of got re-energized and not wanting to lose that momentum, wanted to report back with some ideas on moving forward with this project, recognize we need to work with the province, and BC Housing in particular, but wanting to move forward with the project. So that's where some of the recommended actions are, to try to move forward positively and productively in realizing that the shelter project to be ultimately approved and funded. The other matter, though, of course, we're dealing with city land, city property, and that's a matter for consideration by council, more properly in other settings than this. But it is the site that council has identified, so it's here today as an update in terms of the shelter facility. The land matter, I think, this is for council's other considerations. So. With those remarks, if I could ask Verna just to walk us very quickly through the report and recommendations.
Okay. Will you come forward? Or did you want to stay there? No pictures? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. McIntyre has just outlined, the purpose of this report is to report back to this Land Use and Economic Development Committee on the information that was gleaned from the tour of the Mayor and Council to the Langley shelter on February 9th of this year. And prior to that tour, Council was hosted by the City of Langley Mayor and a number of Council members who provided some deep background on the Langley Shelter project and provided our Council and the Mayor with important lessons learned on the role of the two municipalities, the City of Langley and the Township of Langley, working in concert with BC Housing on getting that project on the ground. As Mr. McIntyre indicated, council members were re-energized by that tour, and discussion. There has been discussion with the homelessness Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group and staff, and on some possible next steps that the City of Coquitlam might be able to take, in addition to the fact that it is dedicated land at 3030 Gordon for this property. BC Housing has consistently said that it wants to continue to be a strong partner with the city in this project, and it, of course, also sits on the Tri-Cities Homelessness Task Group. So in short, this report outlines some of the lessons learned from the Langley tour and proposes some next steps. Staff is seeking authorization to continue to work with the Homelessness Task Group and with BC Housing on finalization of a request for proposals, a draft copy of which is attached to your committee report, to finalize that in preparation for distribution of that RFP as soon as provincial funding for capital and operating costs is announced. Also to work with BC Housing in ongoing discussion on the selection process for an operator for the shelter as well. Secondly, staff is seeking authorization to develop some approach on municipal approval processes. This site requires an OCP amendment, rezoning, subdivision, and we understand again from BC Housing that there are further steps that municipalities can make to maximize the funding readiness of a project such as this. Finally, the report is recommending that Council continue to urge the provincial government to sign its MOU with the city, and also to urge the provincial government to make an announcement of commitment of provincial operating and capital funding. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, I'm certainly pleased to see it come forward, and I think it's important that we keep sort of chipping away at this and and moving this forward in whatever ways we can. I also know that the Homelessness Task Group Advocacy Subcommittee is ready to help in whatever ways they can. Oh, whoa. But I do have a question, actually, that it's not quite clear. So we're going to put together this RFP that has a closing date of June 30th, but it's not going to go out until there's funding ready. So if you could just walk me through this RFP thing one more time in terms of what we're going to be doing with it and what it might look like, that would be helpful, because I'm not sure I understand exactly what we're going to be doing with it.
Madam Chair, in the beginning of February, very soon after the tour to Langley, we took the issue of possible next steps. City staff discussed it with the Homelessness Task Group, and at that time we moved forward on drafting an RFP. At that time, perhaps toying with the idea that it might be the City of Coquitlam who would lead the RFP process outside of the BC Housing RFP typical process. So the draft that you see in front of us was with that in mind. But since drafting this RFP, and hence you see those possible distribution dates and closing dates on the RFP, since first drafting this with the Homelessness Task Group and in subsequent conversation with BC Housing, we are recommending instead that the RFP continue to be an RFP process led by BC Housing, but that the Homelessness Task Group, in conjunction with BC Housing, prepare the RFP and have it ready to go as soon as the dollar signs are announced.
Okay, so those dates aren't really going to be part of the RFP.
They are not.
That's just what I wanted to check, because it was a little confusing.
Nor, Madam Chair, would the City of Coquitlam be leading the RFP process, such as currently indicated in the draft RFP that is attached to the committee report.
That's great. Thank you. The only question I had.
Okay, question? Did you, Councillor?
One of the benefits we felt on the tour was the fact that Langley was able to identify a housing provider early on and help drive funding towards it. Now, we're going to be sitting on an RFP. We're not going to be selecting a process, but we're going to do all the other work. So we're not going to be gaining that benefit of what the Langley had with a early housing provider in place to help that process along. So that was a big point. And was it BC Housing that said, no, you can't go ahead, City of Coquitlam, and do that we will control this? Is that what's come back to us?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, in several conversations with BC Housing, we were given to understand that BC Housing would not participate in an RFP process that was led by the City of Coquitlam, nor would it be bound by the results of such an RFP process. And they recommended strongly that we work in conjunction with them to develop the RFP, and that it be distributed at the time that capital funding was committed.
Well, that's, to me, very disappointing, because I think from that tour that I was at, that was one of the biggest things that we thought about, especially when Langley raised $2 million and then $1 million from the Langley Township to this project, which is a substantial form of the transitional housing to fund that part of the operation. And they did that for a couple of years. Now, why would BC Housing grant Langley that ability, which was, as I went on the tour, I thought is one of the biggest benefits at doing all this other work, moving this forward, is to have that housing provider selected so we can, because we know the issue about money may not be up for another year or two. So we're going to sit in a holding pattern, and that period of time, if we had a housing selector like Langley did, we could have them outside in the community, working in the community, doing fundraising to help create a fund for that other parts of it. So I'm very frustrated about. I'd like to maybe to the other committee members is to request from BC Housing why we are going to be treated differently than what Langley was, because I'm just, I don't know, that's just frustrated, because it's probably the most important thing that I thought we got out of that tour to help us move this forward.
Mr. McIntyre wants to respond to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, this isn't a project that's in a holding pattern, in our view, and this is why we're coming forward, trying to put out some positive, concrete next steps to actually move it forward. But I think also it's with the reality of recognizing that we're looking to the province to be our partners in this, and we need to engage them so that they feel that we are partners and that they will come to the table in time. This is staff's best course recommendation to committee and council, but the notion of the funding, maybe there's other options. Let us take that away. Let's, it's a different time, a different project in Langley, and this will be a made in Coquitlam solution. Let's see if there's not other avenues for fundraising and other means of, getting the community behind the project. I think it's the more of those cards we can play with the province, the better likelihood of this project going forward. So we're trying to give the best advice we can. We're trying to work positively and productively with the province.
I don't get me wrong, I like the direction of what you're doing here, and I agree with moving the process along. I've advocated that for a little while now, to do all our parts to this and finish it off. But in the Langley situation, the fundraising and the rezoning they went through, the housing provider played a key role, and also played a key role in satisfying the community of who's going to be operating this. So I won't beat the point. I just think I'm very disappointed about that. Thank you.
I have one question. I thought that was the whole purpose of moving this along. I thought that was a key element, was to move along and get our provider up front, as Langley did, so that they can be out helping us doing the fundraising and, all the rest of it. Mr. McIntyre?
Again, Madam Chair, that was a different time and a different project. I guess the difficulty about getting too far ahead of ourselves with the RFP process is that if at the end of the day you go through the proper open process and get some good submissions and end up with a really good team coming forward, if that hasn't been part of the BC housing process, if they haven't been involved in that, it may not then respond to their proposal calls and their funding availability. So what we're really trying to do is make sure what we're doing here in Coquitlam will mesh with the senior government funding that will be actually needed to make the project a reality. So, but let us take it away. One of the positives we heard from Langley was that ability to get community support and interest and funding coming in. Let us take that away. We can talk with the task force to see if there's some other options around that. And what we'd really like to do is receive the committee support and council support, and let's get going. Let's keep the spotlight on and look to BC Housing to come to the table as well.
Oh, they better hurry up. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. On page 5 of your report, it said the complexity of funding partnerships cannot be overstated. And the City of Langley also had the support of the Township of Langley. And so this got me kind of thinking about the possibility of opening up a dialogue with the City of Port Moody and the City of Port Coquitlam. I can't quite recall what we may have already done in that regard. It's a little hazy, but I'm wondering if it's not time to open up a dialogue with those two neighboring municipalities in regards to this.
Well, I know we've been there, and I know the answer we got back from Port Moody was they were not interested in participating because they felt it's a provincial responsibility. And I believe Port Coquitlam, I know they're on another different path, but I don't know if they're still interested in this one. So, Mr. McIntyre, do you know any more?
Actually, if I could just add something to Councillor Reid's statement. What I'm suggesting is to initiate a dialogue between those two cities to explore potential areas of mutual cooperation. So in the case of Port Coquitlam, where they've got their Homes for Good program, to explore potential areas with them with respect to something like that. We're not necessarily asking for funding here, but perhaps we're asking for something else.
Madam Chair, if I could, I think you've summarized our past discussions and on this, but perhaps this could be a modified recommendation that the committee might want to send forward to council. This is further to all these other steps and actions, let's open that dialogue to see, I think on one hand, we want to update our municipal neighbors going forward with these actions, and then secondly, to initiate that dialogue that Councillor Reamer's talking about, and maybe their support can be gained non-monetarily or some other means.
Right.
I would hope that they would. So do you want to put that on as C?
I'll make an addition then. Actually, or should it be C or should it be number 4? Recommendation number 4.
Yeah, number 4.
Okay. Initiate dialogue between the City of Port Moody and the City of Port Coquitlam to explore areas of mutual cooperation.
And support.
And support.
Second? Okay. Did you want to speak, Councillor Robinson?
Yes, I do want to speak. I have lots to say on this matter. I just want a couple of things. The City of Langley, or was it the Township of Langley, came forward with their $1 million contribution to the Langley project well into the process. So they came in actually quite at the tail end. So I think we need to sort of keep that in mind, is the timelines of how these projects and partners all came together. And if I recall, Mayor Fassbender said this was a number of years to pull all of these resources together. And we have been in it for a couple of years, but patience is not one of my virtues, but that was the other message that we got. Although patience with BC Housing, I'm wondering if Councillor Reamer was talking about this dialogue with these other municipalities, which I think is a great idea. I think we've sort of been doing it, but informally. It would be nice to formalize some of those conversations. I would love to brainstorm with them about how do we, maybe they have some ideas about how to move BC Housing along, because I do think this is critical. I have been out in the community talking to BIAs, I just came from the chamber, trying to talk up this idea, but I don't know that it's the city's role, or me as a city councillor, to be doing that, and it's a real challenge. And I don't know if BC Housing appreciates that. On the one hand, we're told we have to galvanize the community and bring people together to make this happen, but we're not allowed to identify a proponent who will act to galvanize. And so to me, this presents the conundrum, because there isn't necessarily a natural, we have this homelessness task group, but it's made up of service providers and interested people. I don't think that they're the body who ought to be galvanizing. And so that, when I heard that would make the difference, it was a sigh of relief. And so if maybe we can engage BC Housing, I would like to put it back to them about, okay, so here's the problem. What do they suggest we do? Given that their funding isn't available, but we're recognized and we're told that we need to galvanize all these different sectors, do they have a suggestion? Maybe they have a little bit of money to hire somebody to do this for us. That would be the focus. I don't know, but that's the conundrum. And if we can turn to them and help and invite them to help us problem solve it instead of fixing it, maybe that might be the way to help us move this forward on that front. Thank you.
Okay, so there's been motion number 4 has been added on. So all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Linda will approve. Moving on.
Item 6 is report of General Manager Planning and Development related to the Austin Heights Neighbourhood Plan, progress report number 3. We have a presentation by Nadia Carvello from the Planning Department.
Nadia, just before you get started, a question that we had before and have expressed it to Mr. McIntyre. I wonder why, because this is such a little enclave of blocks here, why it never, on Ridgeway, it never went back down to Blue Mountain, which I think it could have. And then Councillor Reamer was concerned that it didn't go from Marmont up to Gatensbury, because then there's natural boundaries. That would have made much more sense to us for this whole study area. So maybe you can comment on that as you go.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
It passed. I knew it was.
Yeah. And then to change, how do you do it?
You just look at me and you want me to change it?
Initiate dialogue.
Want me to change it?
Hi, I'm Nadia Carvalho, Community Planner and Project Manager for the Austin Heights Neighbourhood Planning process. The neighbourhood plan boundary for this plan area is Foster Avenue to the north, Linton to the east, Rochester to the south, and Joyce and Blue Mountain Streets to the west. And so the question was, why did the boundary stop on the east side? And the response to that is that the Blue Mountain provided a natural boundary. And sorry, what was the other question?
Well, Blue Mountain is the natural boundary, but Ridgeway, you haven't got Ridgeway in red or green or whatever you want to do up to Blue Mountain.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah. So
yeah, and I gave her your question.
Okay. Should I go through my presentation and answer that as we go along? What we're doing there is we're proposing retention of the existing medium-density apartment area, and that area is bounded by Ridgeway to the south, King Albert to the north, Blue Mountain to the west, and just east of Gatensbury. So that's why you're not seeing any changes proposed for that area.
Are you talking Nelson to Blue Mountain?
Yes.
Vermont.
No, I'm talking Nelson to Blue Mountain, that one little block. It's got the Legion, it's got 2 apartment blocks,
Yeah.
It's got the little bottle depot.
Yeah. And so that's part of what we're calling the existing medium-density apartment area. And we took a look at the housing stock in that area, which is comprised of rental and strata buildings, and found that it was fairly well maintained. It provided good opportunities for rental as well as home ownership. And we're proposing that that area be retained as it is. It also provides a nice transition use between the high-density commercial core and the single-family areas that are surrounding that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. In December 2008, Council endorsed the Austin Heights neighborhood planning process, and that process is being undertaken in 4 phases. We're currently in the phase 4, as we're developing the preferred land use concept. We're entering into the final public consultation phase and proposing that we head to Council in the summer for plan adoption. The public consultation process has been quite comprehensive and has included the convening of a project advisory group comprised of residents, community members, and other key stakeholders. We took the project advisory group, as well as council, on a Housing Choices and Main Street tour so that they could see firsthand some of these mixed-use community and housing choices examples on the ground. We've also held a couple of open houses that were very well attended and communicated about the neighborhood planning initiative to all residents and property owners and business owners through newsletters, bus shelter ads, Facebook postings, the city's website, and through posters in different community facilities. In November, we also held a public lecture and workshop on housing choices, which again was very well attended, and we found that residents were quite interested in this initiative. Also supporting this process is a comprehensive technical review and analysis, which includes studies on retail and housing demand, urban design, rental housing, and transportation. The draft conceptual land use plan for the neighborhood core responds to the long-standing community desire for an attractive public realm. It's a key element in creating a compact and complete neighborhood, and it encourages transit, walking, and cycling for people of all ages. It also supports and enhances the existing retail district through the creation of significant additional residential capacity. So as you can see from the map, and as we discussed earlier, the high-density mixed-use core is proposed for Austin Avenue between Blue Mountain and Marmont Streets, and on Ridgeway between Nelson and Marmont Streets. To the north of that, we're proposing retention of the medium-density apartment area, again because we took a look at it and found that
For the most part, the buildings are well maintained, and it provides a range of housing choices for local residents, both rental and home ownership. And then surrounding that, we are working on the Housing Choices Initiative, which looks at innovative, small-scale housing choices, such as coach houses, laneway houses, multiple family conversions for the single-family areas within Austin Heights. Concept. Some of the next steps include proceeding to a public open house in late April or early May, and then to council for first reading this summer. Thank you. If there's any questions?
Is there any questions? Councillor Robinson?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see the idea of retention of those medium-density apartments. I think we do need to make some effort to make sure that we have affordable housing choices, and that is quite a substantial block, so I'm pleased to see that. So I have a couple of questions. When you guys start talking about, is it FARs, I sort of go glossy-eyed because it's math. So you're talking about 16 stories plus? So what's the plus? How tall are we talking?
Yeah.
Through the chair.
Hello?
No, the sound system is something else.
May, do your thing. Where are you going to send it?
Oh, I can't repeat where I'm going to send it.
Okay, this one's on. The densities we're talking about are about 3.5 FAR, and that is numbers. It's similar to what you're seeing to the south of City Hall here.
Okay.
So it could be 20 stories. It depends. The important thing we're looking at is the experience you get from the sidewalk. So as a pedestrian, does it feel like a lower density? So you're setting back the towers. We want them to be small floor plates so that you get a lot of light penetration. Those are the sort of things we're looking for.
Thank you. That's helpful. Would we expect any spillover with this higher density in this corridor down to Maillardville? Would that be something that we would expect to see? Should Maillardville revitalize, as we sort of hope it will? Will this support that revitalization over a couple of blocks, or will it hinder it? I'm just trying to get a sense of competing densities, I guess, because they're pretty close.
Underpinning this is some market analysis which took into account the recently adopted Maillardville Center Plan and said that within that context, while redeveloping Maillardville, there is still enough capacity and demand for the retail, commercial, and residential being proposed here.
Great. So that's. And I have one last question. It has to do with the north-south, east-west spines you had on an earlier slide.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is just sort of a visioning plan. It's not a detail plan. But I noticed that the walkways have lovely trees and stuff. So are they just walkways, or are they access into the commercial areas as well?
There will be storefronts that will frame that area.
Right, so it'll be active and busy.
Yes.
It won't be just the throughfare. It's in
Absolutely,
and out. Okay,
displays will be able to spill out into those
That's
plazas.
all I just wanted to check. Can't see in the pictures. Thank you.
Okay, my comments are, I really would have liked to have seen development potential on the corner, the northwest corner of Ridgeway and Nelson, sort of as a block, as an anchor, and I've discussed this with Mr. McIntyre. And also, the 4-story buildings that are behind, some are becoming almost close to their useful life end back there, so you have no intention of allowing those facing the park or the next street over like Howie and King Albert of going high-rise in.
We hired Dale McClanahan and Associates to review the minimum densities that would be required to trigger redevelopment in that area, and he found that it would be about an average of 5 FSR, which would be in excess of what we're seeing in the town center. He also found that, on the whole, that the apartment stock is fairly well maintained and still has some life left in it.
Yeah, some of it not much.
And so for those reasons, we were proposing retention.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, but Councillor Reamer?
So you've ended the boundary at Marmont, and so the buildings that are currently in between Marmont and Gatensbury, that will all remain the same?
That will stay the same.
Yeah. Okay.
So same reason for...
Madam Chair, if I could, just on that point, I know we just spoke briefly before the presentation. Let us take that away and look at these core area boundaries. I understand what has been proposed, but also I hear the questions and comments from the committee, so let us have a look at that.
Yeah, I don't want this going out to be the be-all, end-all until we've got it right. Let's not go out too soon. Okay, so moving the recommendations forward to council. Rob?
Madam Chair, I just want to, as the committee considers its decision, I just want to acknowledge a couple of the project advisory community members that have been part of the process with us and have given many hours of volunteer time. Erin Davidson, who's with the BIA, we work closely with them,
right.
And I believe there's another...
Phil Johnson as well.
So just wanted to acknowledge their support and help as we've gone through this process.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to add that the Project Advisory Group did review this draft concept in early March. They were very complimentary and felt that a lot of their aspirations as well as concerns were reflected in this draft concept as well.
Okay, we'll move this forward to council then. All in favor? Vote carried. Done.
Thank you.
Just wanted to note that the Engineering, Utilities and Environment Standing Committee is scheduled to start at 2:30 in this room, so I'm not sure if the committee wants to proceed at this time or refer the next item to the next meeting.
I'm sorry, we're going to proceed. Yeah. We have our regional growth strategy, and our meeting was scheduled to be 1 to 3, and I think there's some comments from staff. And if I may, to the Chair of Engineering, can we delay yours a few minutes?
Yes, go ahead.
You're not building a bridge that will fall down in the meantime?
Well, got a couple items, but go ahead.
Thank you very much. So we're just going to carry on, and I believe Mr. Steblin wants to speak.
I can make a few introductory comments. I'm not sure this thing works. Oh, yeah, I guess it is.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. We certainly do recognize from staff's perspective that this is a very controversial issue, and it's also quite complicated as it involves relationships on a number of fronts. And so I'd just like to take a minute to sort of explain a little bit what we are proposing as staff as the next steps go forward kind of perspective.
Okay, Mr. Steblin, could I just stop you for a moment? Are there members from Westwood Plateau here? Yeah, there are. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. 4. Great. We got a bunch. Good. Thank you very much. And I wanted to make sure they were in the room. Go ahead.
Yeah. We certainly do recognize that that this issue is multifaceted and is of concern from a number of different perspectives. So we've also been having some discussions with some of the other key municipalities who also have like concerns on one level, but we recognize that there's overlapping concerns from many of our citizens, not only on the Westwood Plateau but across the city, from a different aspect that has some overlapping and complicating aspects to it. So in terms of what we are proposing, we believe we have to go back a couple of steps and fundamentally highlight for this committee and for council some of the fundamental concerns that we've been discussing at the city managers levels with other cities and the general managers levels in a variety of ways. And just to reiterate some of those concerns, in some of the other larger cities are in various different stages of reviewing of the regional growth strategies. Some, for example, Burnaby has finished the review and come up with some very fundamental concerns with respect to what they see as shifting the balance of powers between what has been set up by the democratically elected councils versus the regional body, and what is the appropriate role. Some, like Vancouver, have not even started the review, but have historically had some concerns. Vancouver has not done the review because they advised Metro Vancouver that because of the Olympics they simply couldn't devote either their staff or council time to this issue. and that they were going to be going forward in the next month or two. Others like Surrey and Richmond also have concerns, and what I'm talking about now is the broader cities, not the smaller, more compact municipalities that haven't had that same level of review. What some of those concerns deal with, and to provide some overview comments on that, a lot of talk has been painted on the vision that Metro Vancouver has in terms of a sustainable region, those kind of things. But very little information and attention has been spent on what we call the back end of the process, or what it would really mean to each individual municipality and the region. Who staffs up to do what? Is there duplication? All those kind of things. So what we're planning to do is for a couple of cycles from now, and what we're right now targeting is the April 26th Planning and Land Use Committee, to highlight some of those issues and to where some of those other communities are in respect to their reviews, and highlight some of those concerns. And the concerns are the who makes the decisions on what aspects of land use. And those decisions are much broader than simply the green space issue that has been dominating our discussions in the last couple of weeks. It has to do with the industrial designations and a host of other issues as well. It also talks about how you would go about implementing that. Not a lot of discussion has occurred at all on that, and exactly how you'd go about implementing them. We'll get into the land use designations. Are the land use designations that Metro Vancouver has highlighted the appropriate ones? For example, one of the concerns that is really highlighted is some past committee and council discussions and decisions around transferring the golf courses out of the green zone / conservation area into the general urban. Well, really the problem is that those designations are not refined enough. We believe that there needs to be additional designations. We believe golf courses are, for example, of such importance to the community that perhaps across the region they should have their own designation. Perhaps they should be pulled out of the conservation area and to be created their own designation regionally, so that we can all look at them and we can see them across the region, and there's some equity in that regard. A number of other aspects, and what we're planning to do is provide a report to this committee to give an update on that fundamental issue, and give some recommendations in terms of where we go forward. We also plan on recommending that the issue I highlighted with respect to golf courses, that we believe that this is an important enough issue that deserves its own designation. And exactly how to do that, we're going to have more discussions with some of the other larger municipalities and cities, as well as the region themselves. And so this is going to be an iterative process that is going to take some time to go through, but that's what we're planning to do. The other two aspects that we believe have been highlighted through this process that deserves some attention is exactly the voting structure at the region in terms of future changes. It's one thing to crystallize and say, here's the starting point. But once you crystallize that, you have to be very careful about the voting procedure at the regional level that is stipulated to make changes in the future. We do not want to create a situation that provides a kind of stalemate that sort of like did occur in the 1996 plan, which once it was adopted, it could never be changed. And so we have to think about that a little bit more, and we've got some ideas that we're formulating now. We're going to be discussing with some other municipalities and bringing some ideas forward in that regard. And finally, the last aspect that we think needs to get some attention is giving our community some assurances that the parks and parks and golf courses and other kind of incidents that they are very concerned about locally here, that may not deserve to be designated regionally, are adequately protected. And we believe there are mechanisms like park dedications that deserve to be explored in a little bit more detail that could give this community the assurances that their parks are safe. And so we are going to be including a section in that report back that Parks will lead We'll report back at the same time to try to give assurances to the community that there's another way of giving the assurances that should make everybody feel more comfortable, and that is a greater use of the park dedication tool. So that is what we are planning to do. There's still a lot of work to be done, and this will be all captured in formal reports that right now we're targeting to bring back to this committee on April 26th.
So if I may, then things will stay exactly the same as they have been with the regional plan since 1996. Nothing's changing until the new plan goes in, which to me isn't in the foreseeable future, at least not where they're going now.
That is correct. Some are attributing great significance to a variety of drafts that have occurred in the last couple of years. And I'd like to reiterate to everybody that they're drafts. And drafts can be captured in a number of snapshots, but they're all drafts. They have no legal significance at all. The only thing that is legally significant is the 1996 plan, which is generally recognized by everybody as out of date, a plan that is not working very effectively and needs to be modernized. Our concern is that when we bring forward the new plan, that it does work in the long term, and we believe taking a bit more time to make sure it works is wiser than doing things really quickly.
Okay. I'll have more comments, but Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Steblin, for breaking down some next steps. I think it's helpful to know, sort of, at least have an idea of where we're headed next with this. Do you foresee an opportunity of inviting Metro to come and speak as well as part of this?
Certainly, in the future, Metro will be coming back. We think it's perhaps another stage later. We think that we should report back on some of our ideas and then having that discussion at the staff level. But just like Metro came out twice in the last year, we foresee a future step that they will come back. Probably not on the 26th of April, probably a subsequent step as they think about some of the ideas that not only Coquitlam but some of the other larger cities have put forward to them, and that they'll be able to come back to us and respond to us in that way. So I do certainly foresee future opportunities for not only Metro to address this committee, but for the community to address this committee, because whatever comes back, we do believe that there needs to be a significant round of public input at that time.
And if I can suggest that when staff come in on the 26th to talk about some of these, that you also come with, and what's going to happen next. So let's just keep that, what next steps are, as part of the ongoing conversation. I think that will be really critical to
We will certainly
residents.
have a suggested next steps section in that report.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer?
Thank you. You've actually just addressed, I wanted to know how we were going to build our community into this process, and Mr. Steblin, I believe that you've just addressed that, so that they will be asked to provide input and feedback when we get that next draft.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you. Are you going to ask for input and feedback before the 26th?
At the present time, we are working through a number of these issues as staff. If some of the key community representatives that are very concerned, for example, on the golf course issue, want to give input into the words we use to describing the proposed designated new category, Jim McIntyre is more than willing to meet with them, and that might get us further along the line and might get us closer to agreement on the 26th. But if that doesn't occur before the 26th, there will be lots of opportunities after. So for some community representatives who want to meet with staff before then, for example, in the next week or so, to provide some words and some descriptors as to how they would like to describe such a regional golf course zone or other kind of zone, I will certainly be more than willing to sit down with them.
Okay. I guess myself and any member of the committee would be willing to meet too, but we should all meet together so we have like minds in the same room in the same conversation, because it seems with this issue there's so many conversations, things are getting a little convoluted here. On Friday I was down at Metro, and I got the chance to talk to some other councillors and mayors down there, And there is a lot of consternation about this regional growth strategy, and I think there are two views. The smaller cities who are fully grown out, all grown up, shall we say, don't have the same concerns as those of us who are in a growing period with growth opportunities. The things that, since this all came to the fore, the thing that I'm finding with the cities, they all agree that there just isn't any consistency between the cities, and if we're all going into this loose partnership, so to speak, which was what the former LSR was, this one's going to be more prescriptive, and it's sort of going to be top down, which is what we're objecting to. But in any event, people do agree that maybe golf courses, maybe we should be looking at the green area in different categories. So I'm hoping that we've had, I can't tell you how many conversations, Mr. Stevlin and Mr. McIntyre and I, over the last few weeks on this, but hopefully Coquitlam will be listened to. And I have to remind everybody that although we think our ideas are the best and the brightest sometimes, they get down to Metro, we're still only, 6 out of 125 weighted votes, or 2 out of 37 when it comes to parks, because Abbotsford's included. So we also will have to make a very good case for what our ideas are when we get down to the Metro Board. So I guess that's about it for now. And if any of the members of the Westwood Plateau want to stay after, I don't have to be in engineering, so we can chat. Councillor Reimer, did you have something else?
I just had a quick question. You've said that if residents want to meet with Mr. McIntyre prior to the 26th to discuss golf course designations, that they can do so. And Councillor Reid also mentioned that she would like to be a part of that, and I certainly would be, and I'm sure Councillor Robinson as well. I'm wondering if we ought not to simply set a date.
Well, what we will do is we will, it'll be a staff meeting with the residents to talk about the issues, but we will certainly provide by email the time and place for that meeting, so any of the committee that wants to attend can attend.
Okay.
And that's, I think that's probably the best way of doing it, because it won't be a formal committee meeting. It will be a discussion type meeting. But we will let you know by email well in advance of when it occurs, and try to pick a time that is convenient.
That's great. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, did you have something?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Just very, very briefly, I do have some contacts with the Westwood Plateau Community Association, so I'll seek that out. But for those members that are in the audience today, and we can talk after the meeting, if we can communicate by email, we'll get a meeting set up here in the next little while.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Just one thing. I understand that in addition to the Westwood Plateau Community Association, there's actually 2 other more informal groups that have been formed as a result of this. One which represents the general area, and then there's a smaller group that live right on the golf course. So keep that in mind if you're contacting the WPCA. They may want to get some representation from those other 2 groups as well. Thank you.
Okay. Is that it? Thank you. I guess we don't need a motion on this one.
No, that concludes the meeting.
So anything else for the good of the meeting? Move adjourn? All in favor?